Jesus, no pressure, right? Organized. So my name's Anne. I live in Brno, and I'm from California. Well, I say I'm from California because I went to high school and college in California, but I grew up in the South, the American South. I had an aunt named Aunt Millie. I used to spend summers with her. She's a very polite lady. She was a Southern belle. You guys know what a Southern belle is? They're like an iron fist in a velvet glove. Like, they know when you did something wrong, and they never tell you. They just look at you and go, well, bless your heart. And you don't know how wrong you've been until a Southerner goes, well, bless your heart. And then you know that you are an insignificant insect. Now, I know the South is problematic. It's one of the reasons I always say I'm from California. But they did give us the word y'all and all kinds of fried food and storytelling, which is what I do. When I was a little girl, dinner was serious business. Okay, we sat down at the table, we said grace, and nobody was allowed to leave the table until everybody was finished. And the only exception to that was if we had an argument about a fact and we had to look it up. Now, this was before mobile phones. This was before the internet. So I got to be excused from the table to look things up in books. And as a result, I have always associated knowledge with freedom. Gonna go look it up, and I'm pretty book smart. I know a lot of things. For example, I used to read the encyclopedia for fun. I used to know all the countries of the world and all the capitals. I apparently erased that to replace it with 80s song lyrics. I know about gloves. Gloves are measured in buttons. Okay, so a 16-button glove would be appropriate for the opera. A lady would never leave her house without gloves, and she would only take them off to eat or drink, unless she's in a historically inaccurate TV show, Downton Abbey. Gloves. When I was in high school, I already knew that I also liked girls. And my best friend, who we'll call Blaine, not his name, my best friend knew that he only liked boys, and we used to hang out together a lot, and his mother would invite me over, and she'd tell me how rich they were and how much everything in their house cost. I can hear my Aunt Millie in my head saying, I think it's rather vulgar to talk about money. But Blaine's mother would tell me how rich they were and how straight Blaine was. And I remember one time we went to a formal dance. We used to go to dances together, because back then you had to have an opposite sex date. So we used to go to dances together, me and Blaine, and we went to a dance at their country club. And I wore gloves, which I took off to eat and drink. And Blaine's mother was there, and she was introducing me to people as Blaine's girlfriend. And then we sat down to eat, and she didn't take her gloves off. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't say anything, because it's not polite to correct other people, but I looked it about the gloves and the girlfriend. And I was right, and she was wrong. She thought that if we stayed together enough, if she rubbed me and Blaine together into enough situations, that I would turn him straight. But it doesn't work that way. I've never turned anybody. Because it doesn't work that way. I may have inspired some people to consider expanding their horizons. But I never turned a man, not even when I was 16. Yeah, so I looked at her, and I was right and she was wrong, and that was me. So often right, and so often not invited back to the country club. I know about the history and the function of the Oxford comma. I know about hats. A hat can be a cloche hat or a beret or a cocktail hat. Nice. Jackie Kennedy was wearing a pillbox hat when her husband was shot. It's just all up there. When I was in my 20s, I moved to Japan. They do things differently there. I was teaching English, and one night I had a rough night. My hair wasn't as fabulous as it is now. Fortunately, because I like hats, I had a hat on hand. People used to say to me, "Oh, I wish I could wear hats." Like, do you have a head? Because that's all you need. So I had to go teach class. It was daytime. I'm going to wear a felt dropped brim halo hat. So I felt like shit, but I looked fabulous. So I went into class. I'm teaching my class, English class. The director walks by, pulls me out into the hallway, and says, "You can't wear a hat inside. It's very rude." I didn't know it was rude to wear a hat in Japan. I'm so sorry. He said, No, it's rude in America to wear a hat inside. And I tried to explain to him that, in fact, for women, you used to have to wear a hat. Ladies had to wear hats to go to church. Never wider than your shoulders or darker than your shoes. He told me that I could take the hat off or I could go home and think about it. But I went home and thought about hats because I was right. And that's me, so often right, so often slightly unemployed. Oh, okay. In Japan, I took a lot of classes. I was teaching and I was also trying to learn stuff. I took cooking classes. I took ikebana classes, which is flower arranging. I took shiatsu. I remember nothing. But I tried to learn stuff. When I came back to California, I knew some things. And a man asked me out on a date to a sushi restaurant. All right. One thing I'd learned in my cooking classes is that although, of course, you use chopsticks for many Japanese foods, it is correct, it is acceptable to touch sushi with your fingers. So we go out for a sushi restaurant, and I reach out for my sushi, and he goes, whoa. You don't know how to use chopsticks? I thought you lived in Japan. And I said, no. See, in Japan, it's actually acceptable. He called the waiter, because it was that kind of date. Aunt Millie would say, "Child, that dog don't hunt." Called the waiter over to get me a fork to eat sushi. First date, last date. That was me. So often right, so often single. Now at that time I was living in California. I was living in the wine country of California. I learned the difference between a Merlot and a Zinfandel and a Cab. Yeah, now I only drink white wine. But anyway, so after I lived in California, I moved to Moravia, which is the wine country of the Czech Republic. I moved to Moravia, and I was, able to use some of my knowledge there. And one night I went out to a very fancy restaurant. This is another date. I go out to a fancy restaurant. I order a bottle of wine. The waiter brings it over, pours a little bit in my glass, and holds out the cork. So here's the thing. If the wine is in your glass, you can smell it in your glass. You don't have to smell the cork. You can just look at it with your eyeballs. And I told him I didn't want to smell the cork. I said, no, thank you. I'm gonna smell the glass. Turns to my date and says, "Tell her to smell the cork." And my date said, "I don't think she will." I married that guy. Still. That's me. So often right. So often not welcomed back in overpriced establishments in my town. Oh, Jesus. They went out of business. I take credit. We did the wine. There's another thing. Give me a second. I live in Brno, which is the cutest town in the Czech Republic. I know that because I've worked for the Tourist Information Center. Not the biggest, not the best, the most Instagram friendly. I live in Brno, and one day I was walking down a street with a very young, attractive woman. We were walking in a street called Pelikova Street. And I said that I thought Pelikova Street was the cutest street in Brno, and she agreed. And then she said, but I wish that foreigners would pronounce Czech correctly. I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but I did get citizenship. She said it's Pelikova Street, and the C, it's Pelitsova Street, because the C in Czech is pronounced like ts, so Pelitsova. And I told her that actually it was named after the 18th century Italian poet who had been imprisoned in the castle named Silvio Pellico, and so it was Pelikova Street. And that's me. So often right and so often walking down cute streets alone. I took dance classes when I moved to Europe. I took tango and waltz and polka. I had this idea that I would go to the queer ball and an attractive queer woman would be attracted to my rhythms. And that would work. Only queer ball, at least in my country, is 90% straight best friends with the gay best friends. I asked so many women to dance for no reason. So whatever. This summer, I was at an outdoor music festival. There was a woman. I asked her to dance. She was dancing with me. Not bad, not polka, just, sort of 80s. Yeah? And when I went back to my friend's new disgusting boyfriend said, oh, you're not dancing with her because you're attracted to her. You're dancing with her to get attention from men. And I thought, wow, to get attention from men, it's so hard. And I thought about like... My first girlfriend, right, walking out of the only gay dance club in my hometown and having broken bottles thrown at us by men. That's attention from men. I thought about like times I've been spit on because it's been more than twice. That's attention from men. Like if I want attention from men, it's not that hard to get. And I could have told him my history. I could have justified myself. I could have said a lot of things. But what I did was I looked him dead in the eye and said the best comeback of all fucking time. Well, bless your heart. Thank you.